but I just want to move on to the Charter of Budget Honesty. I have a copy here which I'm happy to table, and I'm going to quote from it, so that might be
of just the Charter, Senator, that we have.
You've got it?
I'm going to check that I have it. I think I have it.
It's just, there's just one particular page which I can share with the Secretariat, maybe, just in case you need to reference it.
Maybe I don't have the Charter of Budget Honesty with me.
Thank you. So, obviously, this is legislation introduced by the former Treasurer, Peter Costello.
Yep.
And one of its requirements is that there be a fiscal strategy in each budget. If you don't have it, I'll get the Secretariat to bring a copy around for you, but I can also just quote from it in the meantime. Part 4, Section 7 refers to the purpose of fiscal strategy statements. And it says, and I quote, "The purpose of fiscal strategy statements is to increase public awareness of the government's fiscal strategy and to establish a benchmark for evaluating the government's conduct of fiscal policy." On page 58 of the 25-26 budget has the current government's fiscal strategy, which I also have a copy of and can table, but you would have budget papers, I'm sure. And I want to refer to that. So page 58 of the budget, and one thing I would like you to help me with is going through that box 3.1, the government's economic and fiscal strategy on statement 3. Is there any numbers in the government's fiscal strategy?
There are no numbers in the box, Senator, that I can find at a quick look.
I couldn't find any either. Is that box the totality of the government's fiscal strategy, or is there some other appendices or...?
No, that is the fiscal strategy.
That's the fiscal strategy.
But I would say that there are some things that are quantitative in here without numbers.
Yeah, I'll come to those.
Yep,
I want to talk about those in a minute. But is it unusual on the face of it to have a fiscal strategy without any numbers?
Since the Charter of Budget Honesty was introduced, Senator, governments have had different strategies over time. I think mostly it would be fair to say they've had numbers, but I don't know that they've always had numbers.
Like in the Rudd-Gillard government, when under Treasurer Swan, there were lots of numbers in the government's fiscal strategy.
Yeah. So I think it's fair to say that mostly there have been some quantitative measures maybe all, there might be some exceptions, fiscal strategies.
Slightly hard to achieve the Charter of Budget Honesty objective of establishing a benchmark for evaluating the government's conduct of fiscal policy if there aren't any numbers, objective numbers to measure it against. But let's persist anyway and see if we can. So that first bullet point of the fiscal strategy on page 58 says that the government will be directing the majority of improvements in tax receipts to budget repair. Is that right?
Yes, Senator. Can I make a separate point first?
You may.
The overarching goal of the fiscal strategy is in the third para of that box, which talks about reducing gross debt as a share of the economy over time. I would also argue that...
I'm keen to talk about that as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
Before you do,
yep.
How do you identify that as the overarching strategy? Where does it say that's the overarching strategy?
It says it in the second line of that paragraph, Senator.
Yep, so quote it for me.
It says it's the overarching goal.
The whole thing?
So the government will improve the budget position in a measured way, consistent with the overarching goal of reducing gross debt as a share of the economy over time.
I don't interpret that to mean that's the overarching goal of the fiscal strategy. You may differ in your interpretation, but I interpret that to mean that the government will seek to improve its budget position in a measured way, consistent with the overarching goal of reducing gross debt as a share of the economy over time. Is you saying that's the overarching strategy of the overarching approach of the fiscal strategy or objective?
I would have. So that was how I took it, Senator. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's not how I read it, but
yep.
Sincere minds can disagree. On your budget papers, can you go to page 63, table 3.2 of statement 3?
Yep, Senator.
Explain to me what the purpose of this table is.
This is the reconciliation table that I was referencing before, Senator.
Great, okay.
It tells you how the underlying cash balance changes from one estimates update to the next.
Great. As we were discussing, things within the government's control or outside the government's control. What were the revenue upgrades for the government in the 25-26 year?
in that table, Senator.
Yep, and can you read it out to me? What's the number?
Is that the 7.036 billion? Well, 7.036 billion.
7 billion, okay. And what were the government's spending decisions in the same budget for that financial year?
In the line above, Senator. So for both revenues and payments, it is 7.244.
724 billion. So in the 25-26 budget, the government spent all of the revenue upgrades, in fact, slightly more than the revenue upgrades. Is that right?
In that 1 year, Senator, yes.
Yep.
But
okay.
In looking at that 69% of revenue returned over time, that's an over time measure.
Yes, which gives them credit for budgets they haven't actually delivered yet, as we discussed before.
Or years that have been in the past.
For years that are in the future.
And for years that have been in the past. It's
Yes.
a bit like.
Hang on.
I mean, I'm astonished at this line of questioning. Really,
You shouldn't really be,
for a show that wanted surpluses for 9 years but delivered zero of them. Got the mugs printed. I was here when all the mugs came out.
Yep. Well, that's very interesting, but not at all relevant to my question. Thank you, Minister. I'd like to stick to the questions about the budget papers.
What's the point of having a focus on numbers if you can't achieve them?
Thanks, Minister. So, just to come back to the witness, who is the expert on the budget rather than you, Minister, the government did not achieve its fiscal strategy in that financial year, did it?
Senator, as I said, the fiscal strategy, if you look back on page 59 of the budget, it talks about returning the majority of tax receipts there. It talks about the 69%. We've got the number for the last 3 years, which is 83%. Pardon? 85%, sorry.
Thank you.
So if you're looking at it over a period rather than one individual year and one update, then we get those numbers.
Sure. But I mean, like, do we get a leave pass from our fiscal strategy in 1 year? Is it like a hall pass kind of arrangement? We adhere to it some years but not others?
I think fiscal policy matters over time, Senator, when we're thinking about this. You couldn't have every single year doing what you're saying, but the numbers show that's not what's happened.
Okay. You said to me before that it was your interpretation that the overarching goal of the strategy was reducing debt as a share of economy over time. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yes, Senator.
It also, and in support of that objective, dot point 2 is limiting growth in spending until gross debt as a share of GDP is on a downward trajectory.
Yes, Senator.
So how would you define limiting growth on spending? Is there kind of a numerical number we can put on that?
I don't think we have a numerical number on that, Senator, but...
Is there an objective measure or an agreed measure, like faster than the economy grows or slower than the economy grows or something like that?
Less than the previous government, for example, could do that.
If you look at the dot point...
Could do that.
If you look at the point on page 59 towards the bottom, Senator, it says real payments growth over the 7 years to 28.9 is 1.7% on average.
Yep.
And it's 2.7 over the 5 years to 28.9.
Yep.
And that compares to the 3.2 over the last 30 years.
Yep. And what was it in the last financial year?
I think I've heard this question before with finance, and it's 5.5%, Senator.
Yeah, it was 5.5%. Is 5.5% limited? Does that meet the definition of limited?
Again, Senator, I think the idea of all these measures is looking at them over a period rather than an individual year.
Okay. Again, coming back to this gross debt trajectory, which in your words is the main purpose of the fiscal strategy, or the main highest objective of the fiscal strategy. Australian government securities on issue before and after 24-25. Can you describe the trajectory for me as a share of the economy?
Sorry, which time frame were you asking about there, Senator?
I'm asking for prior to and after 24-25. So what's the trajectory?
Prior to and after 24-25.
Correct.
So in the FBO, the gross debt on issue is 33.5% of GDP, and that's come down, Senator.
Mm-hmm. So what is the trajectory for the next couple of years?
Yep, if you bear with me. So what is it? It's table 10.5. So table 10.5 in the budget paper 1, Senator, has the data. So if we go back, so net gross debt peaked at 39.2% of GDP in 2021 in the COVID period. It's down to 33.5% in 24/5.
And then what's the forecast?
It's forecast to go up to about 35 and 36% over the next few years before it comes down again in the medium term.
Yes.
One of the things we'll have to look at, because we've had a slightly better budget outcome and a slightly lower number for debt.
Yep.
That will obviously get updated in my EFO. The lower debt in the current year possibly might bring those down a bit. I don't want to overstate that, but the comparison's not quite apples for apples right at the moment.
Understood, but just to summarise, taking our previous financial year, which we just had the final budget outcome for, you're right, debt was trending down, and now it is trending up. It is forecast to trend up. Is that accurate?
It is, Senator, yes.
So if debt is rising and spending last year grew at 5.5%, which is 4 times the rate of the economy, how is the government adhering to its overarching fiscal strategy of limiting growth in spending until gross debt as a share of the GDP is on a downward trajectory? It's on an upward trajectory.
It is in the future years, Senator, yes. And as I said, if we look at growth in spending over time rather than an individual year, into the out years of the forward estimates, growth is pretty low. It's well below 5.5%.
Yeah, if you believe the forecast. But the government has set itself a pretty rubbery test of limiting growth in spending until gross debt as a share of GDP is on a downwards trajectory. But just at the very moment that gross debt as a share of GDP is on an upward trajectory, spending growth is also on an upward trajectory. So they're not meeting that, are they?
Well, Senator, you're right. These figures, not in all respects, Senator Patterson. You're right about this element of your questions. These are, of course, forecasts that rely upon assessments about the fiscal strategy. And on the gross debt peak, it's expected to get to around 37% of the economy. Just contrast that to the 2022 PFO, when Mr Morrison was the Prime Minister and Minister for a series of other things that were a secret. It had it somewhere between 44 and 45% at the same point in time. There is, of course, an environment that's been described by the officials, and the Secretary traversed it earlier today, where there is, in areas of spending pressure on because of the exigencies that have been referred to. But that is a substantial difference in outcome.
Thank you, Minister.
Driven by an approach that's been about fixing the fundamentals.
Thanks, Minister. We have limited time, and I share the Chair's objective of working through the program, so I appreciate that you have to make interventions from time to time, but let's leave it at that. I think you've made your point. Mr White, you are right in saying that in the medium term that those gross debt figures start to come down. The reason for that, as we discussed with your colleagues in Revenue Group, is that bracket creep increases the tax to GDP ratio and closes roughly 1.5% of GDP of deficit, which of course the government was keen to assure me will not happen. They will not allow those taxes to rise. They won't allow that bracket creep to happen. So if that bracket creep doesn't happen, because the government cuts taxes, as your colleagues told me they may do, gross debt won't fall as a percentage of GDP, will it?
Senator, we clearly have charts in the budget that show how the gap in the underlying cash balance closes, and as you said, it's because the receipts line moves up a fraction.
I'm not sure I agree it's a fraction. 1.5% of GDP is pretty big.
What about I just go, it moves up? Fine. Questions like, in the future, if the government's cut taxes, if that's all they do, sure, mathematically that will make the budget deficit worse, but in the future they could do other things as well.
Indeed, but I was assured by your colleagues and by the Minister at the previous session that, of course, they wouldn't allow that bracket creep to take place, and that there may be tax cuts coming in the future to prevent that from happening.
Senator Patterson,
you can't, on the one hand,
only
claim,
hours ago.
Minister, let me
your
finish, and
memory
then I'll let
can't
you
be
have a
that
go.
bad. Your memory can't be that bad.
Let me finish my point, Minister, and then you can have your go. It's not reasonable for the government to both claim credit for improving budget bottom line and also ensure Australians that the means by which we deliver that better budget bottom line, namely higher taxes on people's personal incomes, won't ever happen. Pick one, Minister. Which one is it going to be?
You started out so well.
Thank you.
You started out so well, and then it's got very confusing.
Maybe only two.
There is, as I think the official has pointed out, it's a bit unfair, really, to ask a question about a proposal that isn't government policy and what impact that might have. The truth is,
which one's not government policy? Just for clarity, what's not government policy?
Well, I've listened with interest to Mr. Taylor venture the view this morning that coalition policy ought to be to abolish bracket
that's not government
creep.
policy, that's for sure.
There hasn't been any attempt at costing what the implications of that might be should the coalition ever form.
This is a hearing about your
government.
Policies, Minister, not ours.
And so I understand test running some of these propositions to see how they land in estimates. But it would be good if there was a coordinated approach across the coalition.
Thank you for that.
On your approach
advice.
to these questions.
I will dutifully.
Our job.
Convey your political advice, Minister, which is gratefully appreciated.
Apologise to Ted for boosting.
I'm happy to share the call.
For boosting Mr. Taylor's
and thank you, Senator Patterson.
Policy bubble.
I don't. Senator Bragg, did you have